Okay, so this paper gives an overview of my MSc by Research project, which is based upon narrative evidence gathered from questionnaires and semi-structured interviews amongst non-religious, quote, undergraduate students at the University of Edinburgh. So first of all, I want to start with what is non-religion? So I'm operating with the deceptively simple definition of non-religion as something which is defined primarily by the way it differs from religion. From this, it's clear that non-religion does not simply refer to everything which is not explicitly religious. It is also clear that the concepts of religion and non-religion are semantically parasitic categories, i.e. to understand non-religion, we first need a provisional definition of religion. However, I hope that by allowing students to express themselves in a manner which wasn't constricted by a priori definitions of religion, I would gain access to real-life subjective articulations of different ways of being non-religious. That being said, it was necessary to have some understanding of where to direct my inquiry, and thus I elected to focus my inquiry upon four prevalent dimensions of religiosity: self-representation, which is much less contested than identity or affiliation; practice, beliefs and attitudes; and salience. And therefore, although religion and non-religion remained open to the interpretation of participants, non-religion was viewed as an individualized, subject-specific phenomenon, combining Lee's definition with four established dimensions of religiosity. So turning to my research, using a subject group of 48 notionally non-religious students, 11 of whom were interviewed, I aimed first of all to break open and demonstrate variety in the category of non-religious, whilst demonstrating the inadequacy of current attempts to do this along dimensions dictated by established dimensions of religiosity. To provide non-religious students with a narrative platform from which to speak about religion and or non-religion in a non-prescriptive fashion, whilst also allowing them to speak about what matters to them and to digress on certain issues if they chose. And to provide an alternative conceptualization of non-religion in the form of a typology that prioritizes what students have said, whilst challenging the very distinction between religion and non-religion through calibrating the typology according to students' self-representations. So a significant number of students selected multiple, seemingly incompatible terms such as atheist and agnostic. Yet, apart from some who openly acknowledged the inconsistency of this position, so some did openly say, yep, this is totally inconsistent, the selections of terms were all compatible at a subjective level. For example, one student selected agnostic, atheist, Buddhist, freethinker, humanist, non-religious, skeptic, and secularist. Not one of these labels were trivial or frivolous, and each made sense within the context of their narrative frameworks, demonstrating that for this individual, and others like him, it is quite possible to hold more than one religion, or indeed non-religion, simultaneously. Other individuals seem to self-consciously alter the terms through which they self-represented, with Iona, a pseudonym, being conscious of upsetting those in her life who use religion as a way to cope, and Severine, who is normally a staunch atheist, fondly saying that she was not an atheist around her grandmother. Such narratives suggested a complex and contextual process which requires a significant amount of cognitive effort and the maintenance of differentiated narratives for multiple internally demarcated habitus. Going further, other students openly suggested that their religiosity or non-religiosity frequently changes dependent upon the context in which it is questioned. These dynamics are made most explicit by Neve, an agnostic, atheist, Catholic, freethinker, humanist, non-religious individual, who stated, yeah, I think it takes quite a few contradictory ones. I swing from not really knowing if there is a God or not, to being adamant there isn't, to finding myself praying when I hit rock bottom. This fluidity and dynamism does not mean that these students' self-descriptions are not meaningful. The negotiation of their non-religious stance appears important to students' sense of self and something which they regularly submit to scrutiny. This serves as a caution against conceiving both religious and non-religious self-representations as constants. Similar to Neve, there were other students who could be considered nominal Christians. To take a quick example, Rose, self-described as Christian and spiritual, yet quite plainly stated, I'm not religious. In her interview, she elaborated, "I guess I'm Christian, but that just means I have a day off on the 25th of December. There's not a lot of meaning behind it. There's nothing. We're just not a religious family." However, she would still select other Christian on a census just because of my family. No other reason, just because, I don't know. I suppose you feel the need to label yourself with something, but totally not practicing. It's unclear why such individuals should be considered nominally religious by scholars in preference to nominally non-religious, when they can be demonstrably both. So the marked capacity of my subject group to pragmatically negotiate this semantic minefield suggested their categorization into 5 types, which cut across religious dimensions and reflect the way in which students articulated important or significant themes by which they differentiate regarding ontological questions. And due to time constraints, I'm going to have to reduce these to sound bites, I'm afraid. So there's the naturalistic type. The dominant themes for these individuals was an emphasis upon science and an enthusiasm for the unhindered pursuit of knowledge, borne out through an aversion to faith, a materialistic outlook, and an agnosticism rooted in the lack of the possibility of definitive evidence regarding the supernatural. Humanistic students, then. It shouldn't be assumed that each humanistic student self-represented as a humanist. The majority position was one of basic disinterest in religion or non-religion. Dominant themes were a focus on the fellow human, a passion for human rights and freedoms. And discourse became noticeably more hostile when religion was considered in conjunction with humanitarian values. For example, Harriet, "I'm not anti-religious in like a personal, I hate people who are religious sense, but anti-religious in that I really dislike institutional religion." In the spiritual group, as a group, spiritual students rooted their self-representations in a variety of experiential phenomena, including love and kinship, friends and family, and the great outdoors. They exhibited an altruism similar to the humanists and an anti-materialism typically associated with spirituality. All exemplified individualized, syncretic, even eclectic combinations of religious and non-religious beliefs and practices. And then the familial type. Beliefs, faith, and values were, for these students, frequently located in the family unit, although most claimed religious commonality with only a few of their family, and frequently cited different parental religiosities, religiously fueled family conflicts, and religious differences within the extended family. And finally then, the philosophical type. Philosophical students exhibited a high degree of introspection and a capacity for self-criticism, providing lengthy definitions and openly articulating the internal processes through which these stances were appropriated. Throughout their narratives, they were unafraid to express doubt or uncertainty, and many claimed to have read religious or spiritual literature frequently, with half having given religion a try. Each non-religious type engaged with non-religion or religion in demonstrably different ways. The spiritual and philosophical students were highly engaged with religion through reading, practice, just devoting time to it. However, the spiritual students were manifestly anti-religious in terms of institutional religion, yet generally viewed principled stances of religion and non-religion as equally unappealing. By contrast, the philosophical students exemplified a balanced and neutral perspective, whilst adopting a number of nuanced non-religious terms and exhibiting a familiarity with contemporary non-religious discourse. The familial and humanistic students generally paid religion little attention, except when it interacted with their key concerns. However, humanistic students generally went much further when religion conflicted with these concerns, actively engaging in political discourse and action to castigate wayward religion, whilst at the same time paying little attention to non-religious debates, terminology, institutions, etc. And the naturalistic students were the only individuals who mentioned experiencing conversion attempts or religious fundamentalism. They were clearly familiar with prevalent non-religious discourse, and there was the general impression that they were unusually engaged with non-religion. Across all 5 types, being non-religious didn't play a major part in these students' lives. However, that does not imply that they could be considered utterly indifferent. They may not be particularly religious or overtly irreligious, but they are keenly aware of where they stand when religion interacts with what matters to them.